Alright, so we're going to start working on the tail, and you can see how this is kind of loose, but that's where we want it to be, is loose. And I didn't clean up and prime this piece, I just kind of did some sand work. The reason why is I figure I'm going to be handling this a couple times, so I might get residue on it. So we're going to do the whole cleaning up once the shell, tail, and all the body's done. Then we could kind of wrap it up a bit, and then we can start focusing on the head and everything. So the way her head's going to be, as you can see here, is I put some Magic Sculpt and Aves a little bit here and there as filler in the past couple weeks. And her head's going to be something like that. So you figure with that, we're going to have the tail coming around this area here. So that's where the tail's going to be. So what I did was I went into the garage and I dremelled out a little bit of a hole in the back here, because this is kind of my markings of where the tail like thickness is going to be, and then it comes out a little bit thin. So she doesn't have a really big, huge tail, and the other thing too is looking at turtles, they don't have huge tails. I mean, I saw a couple drawings where they're big, but most of the majority of them are small. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start creating basic armature. So I have a little bit of extra Aves. It's beginning to get hardened up tonight, so I really want to start getting this on here. So this is a hollow brass rod, and these are good for something like this. The reason why I'm going to be using the square is because when we kind of get into here, if it's kind of a circle and you're not paying attention, it can sort of twist on you. But when we kind of like glue it in at the end and we use the square piece, it won't really twist or anything like that. So this stuff is fairly bendable. You kind of just give yourself a little bit of marking and you sort of bend it where you want it to go. So you keep the part up there fairly good, and then you get this going here. So now you can kind of squeeze a little bit and go and sort of bend. So we're just kind of giving our shape and going. Now this is going to help the whole shape stay, and of course we would like to go with more of a circle rod. So probably what we're going to do is we'll stop like right about there, in a sense, I would say. Now I don't mind if I go a little bit too far, because I could always kind of like grind this down and it's kind of going in pretty far. It's kind of stopping, so that's not a problem. So I think we're going to go a little bit down more and right about there. Okay, so that's kind of where I want to go with it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of crop this off here, like so. So when you cut it, it does kind of clamp a little bit. It kind of clamps up a little, but you can kind of open it back up with a pair of pliers and get it back and open. So the next step is, to make your life a little bit easier from that, you get a hollow brass rod that's a circle piece. And then what you could do is we can get some glue. We just got to pry it up a little bit more. We just need to find a tool, like so. There we go. Okay. Okay, so what we do is I gotta get some glue, and we're gonna kind of glue this in. So let me do that real quick, and then we'll come back. Alright, so I used some glue. I used some of my Instaset, and we kind of got that where we want it now. So next step is we sort of kind of keep bending this together. Now the reason why I put the circle one in there is because we need to kind of go to a tip, and you can't really do that with the square one without trying to grind it all down. So this is kind of where we're going with this, like so. And then the other thing is we can let this stay long, and that's not a problem. So sort of like that, in a sense. So what I'm going to do is kind of curve it a little bit more at the edge, and then what we do is we cut off extra that we don't need. So it's still a little bit long. We're not going to go as far with it. And then just to be on the safe side, what you do is take your shell. Always do tests. Always make sure you know where you're going with it. And it's going to go a little bit lower, like so. And then what we'll probably do is, maybe what we'll do is we'll bend it this way. So if it's coming in this way, it's sort of maybe pointing, like you're coming around and pointing. That's kind of cool. Alright, so we'll go with that. Alright, so next what we're going to do is we're going to do some fast stuff, where we're just going to use this, and we're going to build around it and build up like a little bit of an armature and make it look really messy and just ugly looking for now. And then once that kind of cures up and we have our piece, then we could start really fine tuning it. Alright, so playing around with it a little bit more, we're basically at a good starting point. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to let her like kind of lay down like this on the floor somewhere and just let this cure up. This is, like I said, this is just a starting point. It's just basically creating a shape for now of where it's going to go. And then this way, once that cures up, I could kind of start, you know, sanding this down around here, sort of sanding down there, start building up around there, start building up over there. Now, if at any point I feel that I need to bend this a little bit more, I can always kind of crack the aves here and bend it and then kind of rebuild it. So that's kind of where we're at right now. It might even come to the point where I sort of cut it to here. Maybe the tail is only going to be to here. I'm not really sure yet. But what I want to do though is I want to make sure that this kind of locks into place, and then I kind of want to put a little extra baby powder on here. Just kind of get that around there, and then what we'll do is we'll leave the shell on the back of her as well. One, to hold it in place, two, to make sure that I didn't overdo it. So that's kind of where we're at with the tail. It's a little bit messy, but we're gonna keep going. Now, if at any point that I feel that this kind of curves up too much over there, I can always sort of kind of grind out a little bit more. It wouldn't be the end of the world. But I think as of right now, if we kind of hold it up, it's kind of like what I want to do. I want to see the booty. I don't want to lose that at all. I want to keep so you can see that. So that's kind of where I want to go with the tail. But it's going to be a little bit thicker, and then it comes. So we'll see what happens by tomorrow. Worst case scenario, if I don't like this, I could always redo it again. But like I said, this is just extra aves that I had that I just didn't want to waste. Okay, so it's the next day, and what I did was went into the garage and I sort of sanded some of this down. So I just got this cleaned up, and you can kind of see how it kind of cured. So I kind of shaped it up around here and there. Goes on very well. So I got a little bit of extra aves I was doing with some other stuff. So what I'm going to start doing is start building this up here and making it look messy. I'm probably going to wrap her legs around and some up here of some saran wrap so I don't get any residue all over the item anymore. And it's going to just be a matter of shaping this up till I get it to where I want. So we'll stop, we'll come back to it when I'm done shaping it. But I want the tail to come down a little bit more over here and around, but still come underneath the shell. So it's pretty much getting to where I want it. So we might kind of bend this a little bit forward, like there. I think that'll be kind of cool. And then we'll just keep shaping it up. Alright, so I had a chance to get into the garage and shape up the tail. So I did a lot of sanding on it. You can kind of see how we're twisting around the back of it now. So the idea was to have it a little bit thicker here and then come thin and then kind of thin up. Because in my imagination is that if it's going up toward her spine, it thins out a little bit up toward the spine. So what I want to do is I want to just build up a little bit here. Just like this section here. So it kind of comes up and then it comes in a little bit more. Just because I think it's a little bit, just feels like it just needs to be filled up a little bit more here in a sense. But other than that, I think we're looking pretty good. I just got some other filling areas to do on it because I layered Aves on it. So when I layered Aves and layered Aves and layered Aves, there's like little you know, air pockets that are in there. So when I sanded down, they kind of came out. So I'll just have to fill those and go from there. And then one of the other things I'm going to do too is just off camera, I'm going to just pretty much set up some Aves inside the hollow piece here and sort of fill in this hole with some Aves. So this way this kind of sort of locks in a little bit better because right now it's kind of wobbly. So I just want to make sure this kind of locks in like a square like I did with this one up here. And then we'll have to clean all this out in the back, of course. But other than that, we're looking pretty good. It's kind of coming together. Alright, so while the tail is in the garage, I just sanded it down and it's primed up so it's drying. It would be a good opportunity to start prepping up this head because I got a big chunk of Aves right now and I figured it would be great to utilize it. So what I was doing is I was trying to do some testing here with some of the Aves and I realized that when I sculpted the collar back on in the beginning, I brought it in too far and it wasn't hitting the head wasn't going into where it needed to go. It was kind of too tight. So the other thing too is because I Dremeled it out a lot, the head sits down a little bit lower than where it should be. It should be up a little bit higher because I'm looking at the poison version that's in my TV room in my glass case. So what happens is I kind of Dremeled out so much that it goes down too far because if I go too far, this head will hit it. And if you lean it too far this way, it looks like the neck's broken. So she's got to kind of line up correctly. So what I'm doing now is the idea is to start prepping this so the head goes in and then also I can set up the collar and magnet and all that. So one of the things I like to do sometimes, and this is not going to hurt the item at all, so this is kind of where the head is supposed to line up. So to make life easier, you can kind of just make a mark at my little angle I'm looking at it right now. So that's kind of where it would go. And then you just take some of this Aves. Now even though I Dremeled the hole, that's fine. The Aves isn't going to go all the way down to the bottom, so I'll have to re-Dremel it anyway. And the idea is to squeeze this around so this way your head kind of locks into place. So just throw a little bit of baby powder. Don't need to throw too much only because the dust goes everywhere. And then basically kind of at my angle, I'm lining up the chin with the mark and just kind of squeeze it down. And that's kind of where we're going with it. That's pretty much it. You just kind of line it up and then you get yourself basically a nice little kind of key. Now all this baby powder is coming out. I gotta clean that up. And so squeeze out the back there, as you can see. But that doesn't matter because I'm gonna have to kind of clean that up around anyway. So we got a nice little spot there where this kind of sits in, and it makes life a lot easier now. So you make sure you line up the piece. Squeeze it down a little bit more, only because it might be a little too high. There we go. So we'll let that set up for the night. That'll get kind of cured up. We could kind of just sort of sand it down a little bit up top because we got to keep the collar piece going. Dremel out the hole again, kind of get it down in there. And then what we could do is we sand around and we start working out this collar and get that going. If for any reason that I think that, you know, I just kind of like to play with it a couple times just to see. And I think we're at a good position. I think that's exactly where we need to be with it. The neck doesn't look like it's broken or twisted. And we're at a good position. Alright, so we'll let that dry up. Maybe by tonight or tomorrow I can even kind of cut it. But usually it's something like this, I'd rather just let it cure up by tomorrow. We can flat sand it, clean up around the edge, work out the key system with the head, and then we can get back onto the tail. Alright, so we're going to start working on the head, getting it magnetized so this way to make life a lot easier from when we start sculpting and stuff. Plus it'll be easier for packing, shipping, and just maneuvering around, painting and everything too, so we don't have all this hair and then try to get behind it. So dremel out a hole in the head, and then I also dremeled out a large hole in the body again. I got to dremel a little bit more in the body because it's a little too tight for the magnet. So I have all these magnets here. I've done some videos on how I do keying with magnets. Don't concern yourself with these companies or these containers, because you get like 4 or 5 magnets in one of these for like 15 bucks or even more, when you could just go on eBay and you could get like 20 magnets for like $5 and stuff. So I have all different sizes of magnets for everything I do. And the other thing too is what you want to do is you want to have key stock. It's basically square key stock. It's like, when I say key stock, it's made for like, your door handles and locks and bolts on your doors of your house. There's a square rod that goes in them and it's called key stock. But you don't have to use it for that. You can use these things for anything else. So they come in a bunch of different sizes. I forget the size of this one. So you just want to make sure it's steel, because it does come in zinc and it won't magnetize the magnet. So you want your steel ones. And then the other thing too is you get K&S hollow brass square rods, and I'll kind of give you the size and number on that one. So this is a little bit tight. Sometimes when I buy this key stock, it'll go into these hollow brass rods, no problem. And sometimes I'll get a key stock which is just a little bit too bigger. So all I have to do is kind of just grind this down on the wheel a little bit, just like a little bit on one side, and it'll go right into this thing. At least these I got. So it's pretty simple. The other thing too is what I'm doing is I'm kind of toying with how far I need to cut it with a hacksaw. So I'm probably going to go up to right about there with this black marker. I got to dremel out there a little bit more. And then the next step is, once we get this kind of like cleaned up at the edge and we get that cut off, we're going to attach it into the head. And we're going to make sure it kind of goes in flush and line it all up. So let me go get this cut up, dremeled out, and we'll come back and we'll start working on the pieces. Alright, so I cut the piece off and we're looking pretty good. I did a couple of notching in the end. Hopefully you guys can kind of see it. So what I did is when I went to cut it off, I just did a little bit of notching, just so it helps grab within the head. You don't have to do that when it's, using Magic Sculpt, but I just like to be on the safe side. So more or less what we do is we just take a bunch of this Magic Sculpt and we put it into here. And what I like to try to do is real quick, without being super clean, I just like to kind of make sure that we got a nice good thing here, see if it's too long. So we're looking like it might be a little too long, or maybe I just didn't push it in all the way. And I didn't push it in all the way. So the idea is we got to kind of make it so the head goes into where we want it, but it'll kind of go in nice and straight. So I got to kind of toy with it a bit and make sure we're lining up. The other thing too is if I feel that this is a way too long, I can cut it. But the idea is I want it to be fairly long, because I don't want it to be too short and pull the head back at any time. I want to be able to kind of put it into the hollow brass rod and let it click all the way down and really hold it in. Because sometimes head keys are fairly long, and since we're just using a little piece, we want to make sure we go in. But the main thing about doing this is it's got to go in straight. You can't have this going at an angle, and then trying to kind of go in. It's not going to, so you got to kind of toy with it. So I'm going to toy with it, get it lined up, and then we'll come back with the next one. Alright, so we're starting up the mechanism. So you can see the magnet is nice and flush onto the piece of metal there. And this is the little hollow brass rod piece that I cut off. So it goes and you see it slides and it's not twisting or anything like that. Then we put the magnet down here. And the next step is we take some of our Magic Sculpt. Only because I had it mixed up. Whatever you have mixed up, you can use Magic Sculpt, whatever. So what we do is we start putting this around. So I got to kind of put this around, and it's going to lock it into place, as you can kind of see. But I'm going to kind of clean it up a little bit more and make it a little bit more uniform and cleaner. Now you don't want to get it caught up in there. And the other thing too is when I'm doing this, I got to kind of test it into the hollow part of the head so it kind of fits. Now I might have to Dremel out some more of the hollowness of the head, because this might be too thick. The main thing is we want to keep it locked up. Now you don't want to put glue over there, because if you just put a couple glue drops and stuff on metal, it doesn't really bond too much, especially like this type of glue here. It will bond, but when you kind of squeeze this into the head and you kind of pull it out, you just pretty much, it's not enough grab to it. The Magic Sculpt really bonds a little bit better. Plus it kind of holds it too. So that's what we want to do. So I'm going to clean this up a little bit more, and then hopefully by tomorrow we'll be able to install this into the body. Okay, we're going to start working on the spikes on the tail. Now, looking at some of the artwork, some people drew it where these spikes are the same exact as these spikes here. Some people have it look like fins, and other people have like bones coming out of the tail. And I like the idea that it's kind of like a bonish spike coming out of the tail. That's what I'm going to go for. So the idea is I'm going to paint it and keep it smooth, but then when I go to paint it, I'll kind of do like a texture of paint to make it look scaly up top, but then it's going to stay smooth at the bottom. I saw one or two drawings where at the bottom of the tail it looks like it's I guess you could say the bottom of a lizard or the bottom of like a frog or a bottom of a snake. I don't want to break it up too much. I want to keep it this one, like, you know, I guess it's like a mustard brown type of color, and then I want to give it like bone spikes coming up because I want the spikes to look a little bit like broken, like they're worn. I like the idea that these spikes are going to be white, like they're kind of more like the cartoon almost, and it kind of looks like the game, where this we could kind of make it a little bit more natural, so just to kind of break everything up. So I don't want to just like sculpt onto there and then they could just break off. I like to always make sure that whenever I sculpt something that's going to like extrude coming out, that it's got some kind of like armature or something to hold it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go this route where I have to make sure whatever piece I put like here, it's going to not hit the shell when it comes off. So like if I pull this shell out, I have to make sure it kind of goes in front of it and then goes on. The other thing too is what I'm going to do is I got these brass rods. They're like you know, just thin square ones or rectangles and stuff. So you could kind of like clip them off and you could kind of glue them in and then sculpt over them. That's what I'm going to do. So like the first one will kind of be a little bit bigger. The second one will be a little bit smaller, and I could kind of grind these out, and it's just going to create armature going around, and then I could sculpt onto them. So what we'll do is we'll have some kind of a bony spike, and then what we'll do is like after the spike is we're going to kind of sculpt like these little red circles around here onto there around the spike a little bit, so it kind of looks like it's pushing out of the skin type look. That's what we're going for. Now the spikes are not going to all be perfect. They're going to be like mixed match. Some are going to be a little bit longer, some will be like cracked, and just kind of have some fun with it going around. So I don't know how many I'm going to do. I'm probably going to see, we'll probably have one sort of big one here. We'll throw another one like right over here, and then here, like there, and then like a smaller one over here. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I think that would be pretty good. So I'm going to go now is I'm going to go into the garage and I'm going to kind of Dremel out these spots. The only thing I might run into is if I Dremel out around here, I might hit that metal bar, that brass bar that I put in there. It is possible. If I do, then I'll just kind of have to fudge it. So I'm like, if it's coming here and here, and then I have to kind of bring it over to this a little bit further over here, I will. So they're probably going to come like around and just go around. So I'll work it out. Alright, so just by gluing those in, you pretty much get the idea of how it's going to look in the position. So we're just going to let this kind of cure up a little bit, even though that Instaset makes it like cure in a second. I like to just make sure the insides kind of get a little bit more. Now this kind of squeezed out over the side a little bit, so I just got to kind of cut that out a little bit with an X-Acto blade, but this will give me a good starting point for this stuff. So my spikes are not going to be completely circle. I want to keep them more fin-like, but they'll kind of be bone, so I'll kind of like try to do some scoring into it as I kind of build them out. Alright, so I wanted to take a test and take a look at how this is going, and I'm really liking where it's at right now. So I didn't want to go for the traditional spikes, you know, like just a pure spike coming out. I wanted to give it like that worn type of bone look coming out. So it almost looks like, you know, maybe ancient bone that's kind of split, or a fingernail that's kind of split up. Something like that. So I just put A's on there, and I kind of just did my dentist tool and just create lines, and then use the paintbrush to kind of smooth it out a little bit. It's going to help for when you go to paint it. You can actually put like washes in there and kind of bring out the bone a little bit more. I'm going to let it cure up a little bit because it's way too soft. I need to kind of harden up a little bit so I could kind of just maybe work out the lines a little bit better and kind of maybe bring a little bit more point to it, but not too much. What I might do is, like, you know, once it's all cured up and it's pretty hard, what I might do is like this one over here or this one right there, I might take my X-Acto and kind of crack out a little bit so it looks like it's broken a little bit too. You know, we don't want them to be perfect. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We'll let this cure up, and hopefully by tomorrow, once it's all cured up, I prime it up, we can start working out the edges around each piece like it's extruding from the skin. Alright, so it's the next day, as you saw, and I put A's all around these little pieces here of the bone sticking out, and you know, it works out pretty good. So these are all cured up pretty well, and they're stuck on there very well. And then putting the A's around here and kind of blending it out, it's making it look like it's pushing through the skin, which is what I wanted to go for. Almost like a little mini volcano type stuff, you know, kind of going that route with it. Because if you have a perfectly smooth tail and then you have bones sticking out of it or spikes, it's really kind of not where we want to go with it. I wanted to make it look like it's a little bit more fleshy looking in a sense. So what I'm just doing now is I put it on the back of her, and I'm just kind of looking at different lightings to kind of hit some spots that I might have missed of blending. If for any reason tomorrow I need to kind of clean it up a little bit more, once I prime it, I could use some of my putty. I could do a little bit of putty work around those circle areas, like, you know, like around the edge here and stuff, and kind of clean it up a little bit more and do stuff like that. But other than that, I was looking online with DeviantArt, and I saw a couple more new drawings that have just popped up. And like I said, I've seen some that have, like, on the bottom of the tail, looks like it's the bottom of a frog, lizard, or snake. I don't think I want to go that route with this. I want to keep it a little bit more simplified, but make it look a little fleshy, because I'm looking at the original Bowsette artwork right now, and he's got sort of a little bit of texture on his skin, so I kind of want to go that route a little bit. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably do some kind of like a texture or scaling look, or maybe kind of make it look a little bit animated or something, and then maybe at the bottom I'll just spray a little bit of a lighter color or something. I don't know, we'll play with it. I don't want to go overboard on the tail. I don't want to focus too much on the tail and then we lose the front of her. You know, you want to focus on the front, but at least have something of the tail. So I'm going to play with it a little bit more, but I think right about now we're almost where we're at. So we'll do some cleaning up, and then we'll come back with the final decision and see what I want to do. Alright, it's the next day, and the key locks in very well. So now we got a good locking mechanism for the head. So what I did is I hit the Dremel around this, Magic Sculpt here just to kind of give me some grooves. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the epoxy, two-part epoxy liquid stuff, as you can see here. I'm going to use this stuff, which is going to be a little bit easier to lock this into place. You can use liquid glue if you want to. I don't like to use this too much on something like this, only because the fumes are so strong it'll tear your eyes. Plus, if that stuff, you overfill it, and it kind of gets up here, it creates a hell of a mess, so you don't want to do that. Now, if this magnet was a little bit smaller and I didn't need the bigger one, I would actually just mix up fresh Aves, and I would put Aves in there and just squeeze it in and just let it sit for the night. But what we're going to do is we're going to use the liquid epoxy that cures in about like 5 to 10 minutes. And then whatever's kind of a little space extra, I can use this Aves and start filling it in and kind of lock it in. So the reason why I don't want to put Aves or Magic Sculpt in there, it's such a big spot. If I try to squeeze this in here, being so big and there's not really enough room, I might kind of break the magnet off there, or I might break this, or I might slip and break the back of this, and you don't want to go that route. So just by simply putting in enough epoxy that it just fills into about here, about there. I don't need to fill it all the way up to here, just goes to about there and go. Like what I could do right now is I can give myself an idea of how much epoxy I need to do. And okay, so I don't really need that much. So if I pull this off here a little bit and put this back on there. Yeah, so I don't really need to mix up that much epoxy. So just a little bit will go a long way to lock it into place. So I want to mix up some of that. We'll pour it in and then get this kind of set up for today. Okay, so we've got the Aves on there, and we used some baby powder, and basically we're just making sure that this goes in there. We didn't put any too much Aves, and it's locking down the place, and it's looking pretty good. And I just wanted to make sure I got everything flushed around there too and filled in, because like I said, we need to have some kind of meat for the spikes. If I left it all super thin in there, then I try to put in the spikes, it might cause more issues down the line. So we're looking pretty good. What I'm making sure is when I push this in, I'm making sure that I don't have any excess Aves or baby powder stopping it from connecting. And just mostly baby powder down there at the moment. So, and then what we'll do is we'll just put this back on here like so and let that cure up. But that's where we're at with the neck. And the head's locking in pretty well. It's lined up very well. We'll just have to do another quick sanding on it once it cures up. But at least now the head is locked into place, and we got a nice good strong magnet, so it's not going in. Alright, so it's the next day and I was able to do some prime work. So I did prime on the shell. I looked it over. There's a couple little errors here and there I need to fix up. I just didn't get a chance to do that yet. And then as far as the tail goes, I did a lot of prime work on it and cleaned it up and sanded. And then there's some putty work on it too. So you can kind of see how it's looking. And you can see what I was going for is the bone comes out and then it kind of slopes down to the next bone and goes like that. So you got like kind of a good little, I guess you could say like a dinosaur reptile type tail thing coming out. So I think it looks pretty good. You can see the putty work on some of the areas around here. I just didn't get a chance to sand. It's kind of like the end of the night now anyway. So I think the next day when I get a chance to get into the garage, I could do some wet sanding and clean it up. But at least now, everything's going to be easy to paint this up now. I don't have to worry about trying to mask off all these little pieces when I can just paint them separate and glue them all in. So that'll be a good chance to end this video. The next video is we're going to start focusing on the head a little bit more and the hair. This is now locked into place, and I got to clean this collar up and everything. So hopefully when we come back, we'll have that going. So now that her head is in the body, I can actually start thinking about the hair a lot more now, because it's kind of hard to think about the head separated, like laying on the floor. Once it's on the head is on the body, for me it's easier to design the hair in my head. I also might do some Photoshop work too, just to kind of help me out a little bit more. So looking at a lot of the pictures, I'm probably going to decide whether I leave the hair in the front as is and then I work off of that, or do I break this hair and try to sculpt like the style that's a lot of people have drawn, where it's kind of like you got the bang and then you got these little pieces over here that kind of curve around the face. So I might go that route too, but it all depends on if I can take this hair and tweak it without losing any detail or having to force detail back into the eye areas, because it's kind of covering the eyes. I'm not really sure yet. We'll see how that works, because we have the horns, we have the ears that are missing that have the blue earrings, and then we got the ponytail. So next video I'll definitely have a better idea, because we're coming up to the holidays anyway. So this will be on the shelf while I'm working on other stuff, and it gives me an idea to look at it and think about it, and then hopefully by next week I'll be like, okay, I know what I'm doing, we're going to go that route. So that's kind of where we're at now. So I think the whole process came out pretty good. So thanks for watching, and check out the next video in the series when we start working on the head and hair.